All right, this episode is brought to you by Get the Message Out. If you've ever thought about launching a podcast to grow your healthcare brand, clinic, association, business, whatever, we can help. Drop me an email, jimmy@ptpintcast.com to get started today. Episode we're going to dive into right now. You ever wonder who keeps the world's top golfers swinging at full speed? I always wondered. The ones walking 18 holes a day, every day, under pressure, with millions on the line. I couldn't make a foot putt with $1 million on the line. They've got someone on the team who understands the movement, the performance, and what it takes to stay in peak form week after week after week, round after round after round. And that someone is a physical therapist. How cool is that? Today's guest has spent years traveling with the PGA Tour, keeping pro golfers strong, mobile, and injury-free. Before he was working elbow to elbow with the elite athletes, he was just like a lot of us, figuring out how to blend passion, clinical skill, and a little creativity into a meaningful career. We're going to get into how he broke into one of the coolest jobs in sports rehab. I think if you're even, I'm wearing my golf shirt today. If you're even remotely interested in golf and you're a PT, you had to have thought about it, right? Like how do you get into that? What it's really like behind the ropes of the PGA Tour, as cool as it is, I'm sure there's some tough stuff. You got to know that. And how you can start carving out maybe a similar path, either in golf or a different sport. There are some parallels there. Whether you're a student, new grad, or seasoned PT looking to shake things up a little bit, you're about to get the blueprint and maybe a few surprise stories from the road. I like those. Grab a beverage, loosen up your thoracic spine, warm it up a little bit, get ready to walk the fairway with one of the PGA Tour's best kept rehab secrets, Jason Stodell, on the show. Jason, welcome back to the program. Jason Stodell, PGA. You're off the tour, man, and you're not out of green.
I am. I'm home for a couple months. This is a slow time of the year for us travel-wise, so happy to sleep in my own bed.
Love it. Last time we talked to you, you were in this ridiculous mobile practice facility in Paris. I guess that's an all right place to do some. It wasn't Paris, Texas. It was Paris, France, and you were there for the U.S. Olympics.
Yeah, I was there for the Olympics, period, not just the U.S. team. So yeah, we treated everybody there. I think if I remember correctly, something like 52 out of the 60 players on the men's side and something similar on the women's side. So yeah, we saw everybody all the time.
Worldwide. I limited you to U.S. only. You're worldwide.
Yeah. We travel all over. Yeah. So I was just counting, I think between the three tours, we were at tournaments. Our staff was at tournaments on 5 different continents this year.
Wow. All right, let's go backwards before we go forwards. So we know the end, or kind of the end, or like, maybe the victory lap or the victory lap round or the round on Sunday is you get to do stuff like go to the Olympics and go to PGA Tour events. But let's go way, way, way back. Let's start with this. How'd you get into PT, early influences, and what led you toward golf and performance work? Let's rewind that first.
Yeah, so I had probably a fairly typical intro to PT where when I tore my own ACL in high school, I had to have surgery, and I thought the PTs that I worked with were like the coolest guys ever. So I was a 16-year-old kid working with PTs who were probably 23, 24,
Yeah.
So I just found excuses to go hang out with them even after my rehab was done. I'd go back to the doctor and say, I still have a little bit of stiffness. Can we keep therapy going for once a week for the next 10 weeks or whatever, And I'd go and hang out with the guys. A good friend of mine, Sam Hanaway, physical therapist at the time, he was a PT assistant, became a pretty good friend of mine. And I just thought those guys were the coolest. So that was kind of my first intro in high school. And then from there, I kind of just did the PT thing, and I was focused on it. I knew going into college that this is what I wanted to do. So I was a pretty focused undergrad and kind of went from there.
What was it about? We'll go back to that clinic. You were doing something not a lot of people do, which is volunteering to go do more PT. What was it about it? It's got to be a feeling or an emotion or a vibe that what they do, probably simple but powerful, that made you feel like you wanted to do this thing.
Yeah, I think looking back on it, I think it was just like I just pictured myself in their shoes, whatever, 8 years from now or however long it was going to be. So they were athletic guys. It was mostly guys. There's some female therapists there too, but most of the guys I worked with were dudes. And they were good guys. The head guy, Moses, he was a little bit older, but the rest of the PTs that were working under him were all in their mid-20s. They recently out of school, I imagine at the time. And I just, again, I kind of just like pictured myself being in their shoes. It was a pretty easy, it wasn't a big step to imagine that versus, I got to know the doctor that did my knee surgery. And for whatever reason, medical school was a lot less of an idea for me at the time. I just felt like I could relate better or spent more time with the therapist that I work with. And that kind of laid the foundation for my interest. And like I said, I keep in touch with a lot of those guys even still to this day, 30 years later.
That's great. All right, we're going to play 9 holes with Jason right now. That's the first hole. That's your backstory, right? We're teed off, we're warmed up.
Right.
So now you're in, well, I don't even know where to go next. Where are you that really was the stone or two before getting to work with the PGA Tour? Don't start with day one of the PGA Tour, right? What are the couple of steps or the path before that? I imagine somewhere in PT school or somewhere. Where does that little deviation start?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Southern California, and I ended up going to University of Miami in Florida for undergrad, and that's where I kind of got my feet wet in terms of working with athletes. So I was on the varsity rowing team my freshman year. My grades suffered terribly, so I had to stop doing that. But through that process, I got to meet a good friend of mine that we'll probably talk more about here in a little bit. But he was an athletic trainer at UM, and he's the one that got me into the training room as an undergrad. So as a sophomore undergrad, it was kind of trial by fire. Like there wasn't really a lot of structure to the program. It was like, here's a stim unit, figure it out. Here's a roll of tape, watch how we do it, and kind of go. Back in the day when it was a lot less formal on the athletic training side. So I started working with athletes there at the University of Miami, the football team, baseball team, swim team, track and field. Kind of got to see a little bit of everything there. And then, from there, going to physical therapy school. I went in St. Louis at Washington University. Shout out to WashU. Still keeping close touch with a lot of professors there, Shirley and Tracy Spitznagel and Mary Kate McDonald and the crew, Marcy. Kind of kept it going there and at WashU. Got to know some of the local trainers and professional sports there. So the St. Louis Blues and some of those guys. And then, coming out of school, I talked to my previous boss at the University of Miami at the time was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I had an internship lined up, and then it kind of fell apart because they got rid of their coach. And long story short, I ended up going into private practice instead of taking a job, as an intern in the NFL. And who knows, it could have ended up differently. I could be talking to you from a training room, with the Rams or something. But it worked out all right.
That's not bad. All right, so how did it lead to the PGA Tour? Like, what was the break there? So you haven't left PT school yet, or was it after?
Yeah. So as we're getting close to graduating, I just sent a resume out to whoever would look at it, and one of my now close friends on the tour, who's been with the PGA Tour for 37 years or something, Paul Shuren, he actually reached back out to me, when he got my resume and said, it was basically the conversation was, look, kid, we're not gonna hire a new grad, but here's some stuff you can do. And we spent, probably a good 45 minutes, if I remember, again, years ago, just talking about, here's some stuff to work on. Here's some things we look for in candidates, to people that do well, treating the golfers. And I kind of put it in my back pocket, kind of thought about it, but didn't really fully pursue it. Went into private practice first up in the Seattle area, then we moved back down to California. And literally, I think 7 years later, the medical director from the tour said, basically, I have this resume sitting on my desk from 7 years ago.
Still?
Like,
all right.
Let me know what you've been doing since then, and let's chat. And that was in November, and they hired me in January of 2009.
That's great. I mean, score one for paper resumes, and not everything's got to be a PDF, right? That thing just lingered. Was it on special paper? Was it made of lead so they couldn't move it or anything like that?
Gold embossed stationery.
All right. But wait a second. So let's go back though. So you had that 45-minute conversation, right? You were reaching out. They're like, listen, bud, you're punching above your weight, but you're asking.
Yeah.
And that bought you 45 minutes with someone who gave you advice, but then you did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the main takeaway from that conversation, looking back on it, was you need to have really good manual skills to work with golfers on a PGA Tour. And as a new grad, you kind of feel like you know everything, but
Sure.
going into practice, I realized pretty quickly that my manual skills were nowhere near kind of where they needed to be. So I ended up doing a year-long manual orthopedic residency,
Ah, there it is.
and it was like a one weekend a month kind of thing for the didactic work, and then we had mentors coming to my clinic, and that was awesome. Like I would have been lost if I started with the tour without doing that, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, like, if you came in and spent some time with us in the trailer on the PGA Tour, there's a lot of overlap between what we do as PTs, and we have a chiro on the trailer as well. And you'll see PTs manipulating joints, and you'll see chiros doing exercise, and you'll see PTs, evaluating spines, and you'll see chiros evaluating elbows, and there's a ton of overlap to the point where you might not recognize one or the other. And I think that's pretty common in this, especially in the professional sports setting, where each clinician, whether you're a PT or a chiro or trainer, they're so advanced in their skill level and skill set. They've been working at it for years and years, kind of honing their craft, and it's to the point where the player doesn't necessarily care who you are as far as your credentials, but
Sure.
are you going to make me feel better? And that's kind of the approach we take with our staff, and that's sort of how I approached it too.
I was giving advice from he calls himself the sport PT, which is Eric Mera. One of the first episodes I did 10 years ago, and he said, I was asking about sports PT. I thought that was the direction I wanted to go, and I said, just bottom line, man, what do you need to be a good sports physical therapist? And he gave these 3 A's, and I'd love to hear your take on this, because I've been regurgitating Eric's advice for years. And he said, you need the 3 A's. You need to be available. He's like, in sports, it's not a 9 to 5, man. I mean, we've talked to you when you're around the world, right? So you got to be available. You got to be there. Athletes are all over the place, travel, and all hours, right? So available. And he said affable, meaning people got to want to work with you. If you got puss on your face, if you got an attitude, listen, they got options. Athletes have options to who they're going to work with. So available, affable. And then the third one blew my mind, was adequate. He's like, listen, I know everybody thinks they want the 37 certifications after your name, but he's like, I need you to know the basics. I need you to be adequate. Where a lot of people would say, like, I need to be this most skilled in the world, and that's so specialized. He's like, listen, I need you to do the basics at scale with a good attitude when the person needs you. So what are your thoughts on the 3 A's from Eric Mera?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it comes down, to sort of the common theme there is relevancy. So for us, one of the biggest battles we fight year in and year out is staying relevant in the front of the golfer's mind, because they, like you said, they have options. These guys are making
Sure.
15, $20 million a year. Some of them, it's nothing for them to drop money on a private guy or bringing somebody out with them. And a lot of them do, but they still come to see us as well. And the reason they see us is because they know we're going to help them feel better, play better, etc. So yeah, I think the adequacy thing too. I think I look back on or kind of think back about just being just a good, solid orthopedic physical therapist is a really good place to start. And you can do as much of the content stuff as you want, and we encourage all of our guys do. We're all doing advanced things like needling and cupping and IASTM and all these other kind of tools of the trade or whatever. But like you mentioned with the 3 A's, like it comes back to just being a good manual therapist, be able to evaluate and treat dysfunctional movement. That's kind of in a sentence, I feel like what we do as PTs, and there's really nobody better at it from a professional standpoint. So being able to take a look at a golfer, see how he's moving or she's moving, and then be able to correct whatever dysfunction you see. Anything beyond that is gravy. And I think when you add the personality side of it and the availability side of it, I think it's right on the money.
All right. This next question, we'll move to hole number 3 we'll play the front 9 with Jason here. You must have been asked this a lot from therapists, from people you meet at dinner parties who find out what your job is, right? Walk us through the day-to-day, travel, prep, recovery, communication. What's this job really like? I mean, believe me, standing on the fairway and watch this, I'm sure is the victory lap, but that can't be all it is. So how do you walk people through with the day-to-day and what this job is really like?
Yeah, when I talk to students, especially, I tell them I promise you I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but it's not all roses and rainbows, So
Sure.
as you can imagine, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just showing up and treating Tiger and Scotty, right? So for us, a tournament is a full week, right? So even though the competition is Thursday to Sunday, we show up. We usually travel on Monday, so we'll fly in Monday afternoon to wherever the tournament is. I think you've seen that the semi truck trailers that we use is one's a PT clinic and one's a or therapy trailer we call it, and one's a fitness trailer. So at every event we have 2 physical therapists and a chiropractor on the therapy trailer. Then we have 2 athletic trainers in the fitness truck, and then we have
Great.
another trainer in what we call the recovery center. So those are 3 facilities, 3 options that the players have to use, and all 3 of them have to be manned. They have to be set up and everything. So we do that on Monday night or Monday afternoon. And then Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., I'm showing up, and there's usually 2 or 3 players waiting for me. So
Wow.
we're up and running 7 a.m. Tuesday. So Tuesday's a practice day, so we're there 7 a.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. Wednesday is usually a pro-am day for most tournaments, so that means
Right.
we're there an hour and a half before the first tee time, so 5 or 5:30 in the morning sometimes until 7 o'clock at night. And then competition starts Thursday, so a couple hours before, so again 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday is kind of when the circus starts back up. We're there 2 hours before, so we get the guys out, and then for us, as soon as the last groups tee off, we pack up. So the trailers have to get towed to the next tournament, which
Wow.
means we're not around to watch the final putt drop typically.
Oh, get out of here, man.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. Like in 17 years, I don't think I've ever been
That's
at a
awful.
tournament on site when, right, except maybe like in a Ryder Cup or something when we're staying through Monday. But usually we're out. Like I'm on an airplane flying home or flying to the next tournament when whoever's winning the tournament
Checking your
makes that
phone to
final
see who
putt.
won. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. And then
Oh,
sometimes if it's a Masters or a U.S. Open, like you're in the air without coverage. So I'm like, dang it, like
oh.
trying to figure out who won. So
As
yeah,
a golf fan, that's got to be brutal. That's like, I mean, that's awful.
yeah, and I've been around long enough to where it's most weeks it's not a huge deal, like whether I find out right
Right.
now or when I land, but
Right.
yeah, certainly the bigger tournaments for sure. It's like, and especially if it's a player that like, say he's been hurt all week and he's in contention, like you really want to pull for those guys, even
Yeah.
though I probably shouldn't, but try to remain neutral. But there's definitely, we have our favorites too.
That's great. All right.
Yeah.
So that's what the week is like. It's a lot more than, I mean, it's not at all standing and watching at the 18th
Right.
green. You can't do that. But let's
Right.
go inside the person who might be listening who's like, yeah, I'm still in, even though it sounds pretty grueling. It sounds like I need to improve my skills, and I still think I want to do this. What would you talk about in terms of the skills and DNA of a great PGA PT? What talents maybe matter most? Talents are what you're born with. What skills, though, those are the things you can learn. And what maybe separates the good from the great?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the manual side of it and just being a good manual orthopedic physical therapist, not just manual, but we spend a lot of time exercise as well, maybe just as much. Um, so from a skill standpoint, I think that can be learned and taught. So spending a lot of time, again, post-professionally, when you graduate PT school, for the new grads that are listening, you're not done learning, right? So continuing to expand your skill set. Sometimes, early in your career, you sort of don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
So once you're out practicing, in your clinic or wherever, you'll realize, man, like I've seen 3 or 4 of these shoulder patients in a row that they just don't seem to be getting better. Like I need to tighten up my skill set on whatever, on shoulder exercises or scap strengthening or whatever the case might be. So once you're out practicing, kind of figure out what you're not good at and make that, turn that into a strength if possible. And then beyond that, specifically guys on our staff, you kind of have to be a self-starter. There's a ton of independence with what we do. We have a medical director, but we're pretty much on our own as long as we get the job done. So, for example, things like booking travel, right? So
Oh,
we're responsible for booking our own travel, and our guys are professionals, so they're not going to, guys have made the mistake of booking the last possible flight in on Monday night, and then it gets canceled or delayed, and like all of a sudden you're showing
yeah.
up at noon on Tuesday, and guys are standing around waiting for you, kind of thing. So that's one example of if you're not a self-starter, you might be kind of cut corners or whatever. So we try to encourage our guys to be independent thinkers and independent operators, functioning within the team, but also being motivated and sharp enough to handle your business from a
Yeah.
professional side. We don't have a a general manager or a head coach kind of breathing down our neck day in and day out.
Sure.
Obviously, there are officials with the tour that are keeping an eye on us and stuff, but for the most part, we try to kind of govern ourselves within our staff. Like I said, there's 6 of us in every tournament, so whoever gets there first, maybe they're grabbing the parking passes for everybody, or
Mm-hmm.
if a guy has a delayed flight, we're covering for him. Maybe I'm setting up the fitness truck because a trainer couldn't make it in because of traffic, whatever. So, we function as a team, but within the team, we have a bunch of highly functional, highly independent, super competent PTs and athletic trainers and chiros on our staff that really kind of keep the ball rolling.
Sounds like act like you've been there before.
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
I mean, all of our guys are, I think probably our newest guy probably has been a PT for 7 or 8 years, so all the way up to, I've been a PT for 24 years. We have other PTs on the Champions Tour that have been around. Like I mentioned, Paul, he's been on the tour for 30 something years. So, I mean, if you add it all up, we're talking literally like hundreds of years of experience. So,
Yeah.
that kind of comes to fruition when a player comes in and wants to get better.
So let's talk about on the 5th hole, tools, training, and education. Just anything. People, I'm sure PTs want to talk shop and say, hey, what are the courses that you think were worth it? What are the certifications where the juice is worth the squeeze? Or a mentor. People are always valuable. Anything that genuinely mattered that you typically bring up to someone who's like, hey, how do I get the edge? What are the things that are worth paying attention to?
Yeah, I think I saw your list here. One thing that came to mind, again, I'll be unabashedly biased here as a WashU guy. I think for PTs to go back and take a look at Shirley Sahrmann's work with the movement system, it is perfectly aligned with what we see in golf, right? So repetitive movements create these dysfunctional syndromes or patterns that we see over and over and over again. So whether you're a new PT or you've been out for a while, going back and reading Shirley's book, taking a course in the movement system, again, I'm super biased with that, but that's sort of where I start when a golfer comes in. We kind of think about like, what's moving too much versus what's not moving enough, right? And the idea that there's, these relative, I'm drawing a blank on what she calls it, but some things move more than they should. They're hypermobile. Some things don't move enough. And so how do we correct that? And it's a challenge to do, right? So if you're a professional golfer and you're swinging a golf club, I mean, literally 100,000 times a year,
That's a lot.
the 1 hour of exercise we do in the therapy trailer is probably not going to offset all that, but starting to look at that and think about, or getting guys to think about, maybe we're not changing the golf swing, but how are you sitting in your hotel room when you're watching TV, or
Right.
what does it look like when you're on an airplane, or what are you doing when you get off the plane before you hit balls, and things like that. Like, what are we doing outside of just swinging a golf club? And I think if you go back and take a look, Shirley's stuff with the movement system is kind of perfectly aligned with that. It might not be golf specific, but it's not a huge jump to apply that to a high level golfer.
Look,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you just made me think of another question. We'll call this a sand trap question, but
Yeah.
These guys are shooting and, they're shooting what's called par, which is a place I've never been. I've heard it's this mystical place that you can apparently go and actually hit. These guys are doing 4 rounds of golf, but they're doing other training rounds and they're taking practice. Are they, number one, tracking how many swings? Because you just mentioned that there are hundreds of thousands, thousands of swings a year. Are they tracking it? And ballpark, how many swings are they doing in a week? Because as someone described to me before, golf is a unilateral, one direction plyometric explosion. And that is not a necessarily easy thing on the body. So are they tracking things just like other athletes might, mileage or reps or things like that? And if so, what's a ballpark number of swings for a professional golfer in a week?
Yeah, so I don't think they're as good at tracking full swings. The number I threw out there, 100,000, was based on some research. Just very anecdotal, just asking players and kind of seeing what a typical week look like. And then a typical like tournament versus not a practice week.
Sure.
Obviously you're playing, maybe you're not playing well and you're playing eight tournaments in a row sometimes, which isn't unheard of, 8 weeks in a row. But yeah, I think in general, like 1,000 swings a week in a tournament week is probably pretty fair.
That's 1 round of golf for me though, just so we're in context. That's 2 rounds of golf. I can hit 500.
Right. And we kind of half jokingly, we talk about like professional golfers are the only athletes that practice after they compete. So like, you never see Tom Brady throwing passes or Patrick Mahomes, or you don't see Shohei going out and taking batting practice after the game's over. Maybe they do, but definitely not as many swings as our golfers take, but it's not uncommon for our guys to go out and play a 4 hour, 5 hour round and then go to the range for 2 hours, then go putt for an hour after
Wow.
that. So, some guys are at the golf course for 12 hours plus. And
Wow.
obviously that repetitive movement, like you kind of alluded to earlier, that leads to some pain patterns that are pretty
Yeah.
consistent and common that we see over and over again. So, part of our job is sometimes kind of trying to pull the reins on their practice schedule, especially,
Sure.
we try to periodize it where maybe the Masters is coming up and they're playing 3 weeks in a row going into the Masters. Well, my back's bothering me and I still have 2 weeks to go. Well, maybe we skip the Friday afternoon session, or maybe if you miss the cut, maybe we shut it down Saturday and Sunday before you fly to the next course or
Mm,
something like that. So we know, the goal is not to play great at this tournament. The goal is to play great at the Masters.
sure.
So, giving our guys that kind of advice is a big part of our job too.
And just we reviewed this last time we spoke, but in the structure, these are all independent athletes, like, right? You work for the
Yeah.
tour. You're a resource available to them. They could use their own if they wanted to, or not use you. But you're really there, just like a physical therapist patient relationship. Is that right? Like you're
Yeah.
suggesting, you make suggestions, but they make decisions because this is their
Yeah.
livelihood, their job.
Right. So yeah, like I mentioned, we don't have a general manager or a head coach that
Right.
makes the playing time decision, right? So as an independent contractor, all I can do is suggest to the player. And I don't think they'd come to see me if they didn't respect what I had to say. So,
Sure.
and I would say it's generally pretty rare. Like if they're at the tournament, we're going to do everything we can to help them play. But there's definitely times when a guy that, hey, I picked up my luggage off the conveyor belt at the airport and I tweaked my back and now I can't stand up straight. And, maybe they pull out on Tuesday. But usually what happens is they come in, they're not feeling great because of travel or whatever. We treat them all day Tuesday, we treat them all day Wednesday, and then we kind of make a decision either Wednesday night or even sometimes it's Thursday morning. And as you know, at a PGA Tour event, there's an alternate list. So
Right. Right.
there's 120 spots, and then there's 10 alternates. And of those 10, maybe 3 or 4 of them are on site. And it happened. I've seen it happen before where 5 or 6 guys just,
Go down.
luck of the draw, go down for whatever reason. And sometimes, very, very rarely, sometimes there's not even enough alternates on site to fill out the field. So they play a couple guys short. That's pretty rare, but it happens maybe once or twice a year. But yeah, so to your point, my suggestion is just that. It's a suggestion. It's let's treat the heck out of it. Let's see where we can go. Now, if it's something where they have a hot disc that's with ridiculous pain, and every time they try to bend over to get the ball out of the hole, their foot goes numb. We're definitely suggesting to them, but highly recommended they pull the plug on the tournament because you're not
Sure.
going to do anybody any good. And something that could be a week or two long. Now all of a sudden you try to blast through it, and now 6 months later it's still bothering you. That's what
Yeah.
we want to avoid. So,
Yeah.
and definitely within that, there's some we're a little more lenient with allowing guys to or suggesting guys can go ahead and continue to play with pain. If you're trying to win a Masters or a U.S. Open, there's a little more leeway. If
Sure.
we're at an opposite field event in Puerto Rico or something, then maybe it's like that's not the best thing to do, given that the goal is to make it to the FedEx Cup playoffs at the end of the season. What we don't want is for you to try to blast through it, and now again it's bothering you 6 months from now.
Yeah. All right. Sixth hole here. It's par 3, Jason. It's rapid
Okay.
fire. 3. This is person, place, and thing.
Okay.
So I want you to give me a PT or mentor. This is your chance to give a shout out. Someone
Yeah.
every golf PT should know.
Right. So I already gave Shirley a shout out, so that'd be probably top of my list. Shirley's become a pretty good friend of mine over the years, a good mentor. Um, Another one that for me personally, that was a great mentor for me early on was a gentleman named Jim Whalen, who, if you're a football fan, Jim's kind of a legend in the athletic training circles. He's been the head trainer for the Patriots for pretty much their entire run, but he's the one I mentioned earlier that helped me he introduced me to the athletic training profession early on, got me working with athletes. So he's not a PT, he's an athletic trainer, but shout out to Jim Whalen. I don't know if he'll watch this, but yeah, he's a legend for sure. And he's again kind of my first real sort of intro to what it's like to be a professional and working with professional athletes in that type of setting. So that'd be my second guy. Paul Shuren I mentioned. So he's basically the one that was responsible for bringing me out. Him and our medical director Tom Hospital. So Paul's a legend in golf, professional golf circles. There's not a professional golfer out here that hasn't come across Paul at some point in the last 37 years or so. So that'd probably be my three there, I guess.
All right, so that's
Yeah.
your person. How about a place? I mean, we just before we hit record, you were like, well, it's in Cozumel wrapping up the season. But how about a place that you just loved working? Maybe it's even one of those places we wouldn't assume.
Yeah, I think I mean the annual pilgrimage to Augusta is pretty special. I've done it. This I think was my 12th or 13th trip to the Masters, which I will never take that for granted. It's such a cool place. That's probably the easy answer. A couple years ago, I got to bring my dad, which was incredible. He was like a kid at Disneyland, so it was fun to walk to Amen Corner with my dad. That'll be a pretty special place for me. After Augusta, I think Pebble Beach is probably a very close second.
Yeah.
Another magical place, sitting out there on the, by the eighth green or eighth tee box and seventh green there. Cool little spot. There's some grandstands that we spend time up there sitting in and solving the world's problems as a staff. So Pebble and Augusta are probably the big two on that list. And then some of the one-offs like Bethpage for the Ryder Cup is a really cool spot. A couple months or last month. We had a good time there, just from a kind of different, like if Augusta is like church, Bethpage is like, I don't know, it's like you're at Yankee Stadium listening to the fans and stuff. So I'd put that up there. And then, the three Olympic venues. So Rio was awesome. I had never been there before. Tokyo, I didn't get to see too much of just because of COVID stuff, but that was fun. And then Paris was incredible last year, as you saw.
Love it. All right. And finally is a thing, person, place, and a thing. Is there a book, a podcast, resource? What would you say? Is there a textbook? Like if someone were you after that first long conversation, listen, kid, we're not going to hire you right now. Is there something they could just go to the library? Kids, the library is a building filled with, okay. Yeah. But, or download, watch. What are the resources? Is there a thing you'd suggest or to someone?
Yeah. I've kind of like, not necessarily physical therapy related, but I've been on this kind of leadership decision-making kick as far as my reading goes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of those books, like I'm reading one now called Profiles in Audacity. So it kind of goes through like a bunch of anecdotes over human history from Cleopatra to Truman and to Elon Musk and guys like that, like what goes into some of these kind of society changing decisions that they made over the years, and that's maybe not quite the same scope that we're talking about. But beyond that, I listen to a ton of podcasts, PT podcasts included. If I feel like learning, I'll listen to Huberman or maybe Lex Fridman. If I feel like laughing, maybe it's Rogan or Theo. I listen to some history podcasts, so definitely not PT related there, but that's my own personal interest. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now.
All right, 3 holes left on this 9 hole playing the front nine with Jason. Let's go now to the future. Now we get to sort of switch to the future. Where's golf performance PT heading? What should a young PT right now or somebody in school be doing now if they want to follow in your footsteps? What's the future of the profession, really? I guess let's go with that big question. It's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I think at the upper levels in professional sports, whether you're in football, baseball, golf, hockey, whatever, there's this kind of fusion that's taken place between linking like biodata and statistics and things like that with performance, right? So that's sort of where we're at now. We have partnerships with Whoop, for example. So we have a lot of golfers wearing Whoop bands. We're about to announce, I can't say anything yet, but we're about to announce another big partnership with a national level company that's going to, I think, help us with, as an example, looking at HRV, for example, heart rate variance, and how it relates to scoring average, for example. So maybe,
interesting.
Yeah, maybe a golfer has as a tournament wears on, maybe the HRV gets worse and the scoring average goes down. I'm not saying that's the case, but
you're
I wouldn't
be
trying
surprised to figure it out.
if that was. Yeah, so that's one example. Like how can we link some of the wearable technology with how golfers are performing, and then is it even, so here's the data, is it even correctable? For example, maybe the golfer has a weekly tradition of going out drinking Saturday night, and then they try to go play golf on Sunday. And again, that's becoming fewer and further
I
between.
bet.
As the purses have gone up, the golfers are taking things a lot more seriously in terms of their recovery and whatnot. But it's not it's not a difficult step to take, I don't think, to think that what we do after our round will affect how we feel and how we perform the next day. So I think that's probably kind of where some of our program is going. Like people ask me about AI. I don't know. I'm 48, dude. Like I'm an old rooster when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think there is a place. I guess probably some AI data can kind of pour through some of those statistics we just talked about. I had a really interesting conversation. This is probably a couple years ago now with one of our golfers, Adam Scott, who, as you know, he's been really good for a really long time. He takes really good care of his body. But we were talking about the idea that PGA Tour golfers seem to be getting younger and younger. And there's some stats that prove or kind of bear that out. Like guys are winning faster. They're keeping their cards quicker. There's obviously a lot of turnover and whatnot, but you would see guys winning. Michael Brennan won his, I think, second or third start a couple weeks ago in Utah on a sponsor invite. And that was pretty rare before. And my conversation with Adam was basically, we were talking about statistics, and he said when he started back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they didn't have nearly as many statistics available. So it took him, the better part of his first season to realize he was a really bad long iron player at the time, right? So, say 8 months into a season, it's like, man, I can't hit a 5-iron compared to the other guys. There's nothing statistically that he could look at to bear that out. So he said then it took another 6 months to really work on over the off season and stuff, and work on his long irons to where all of a sudden they weren't a weakness and maybe not a strength, but like at least it was a push. He said that the whole process, at the time it took him a year and a half. He goes, now 3 or 4 tournaments into your rookie year, you can look at every statistic on the PGA Tour's website, and you can see I'm ranked 185th on 175 to 200 yards out. And so within three or four tournaments, everything, club head speed, whatever. And so now you can identify those weaknesses very early in the process and kind of arrange whether it's your fitness program or your practice sessions or whatever, to address those weaknesses. Now, instead of a year and a half, now it might be 2 or 3 months. And so that's one way. And I think probably at college level, guys are already doing that. They can track, club head speed and things like that with their TrackMan, and maybe the statistics aren't quite the same as they are on the tour, but the point is using statistics to kind of objectively identify weaknesses and then address those weaknesses, again, whether it's in the gym or on the range or whatever. The process is a lot faster than it used to be.
Wow. Things are just speeding up. All right. 2 holes left. Eighth hole here. Anything I didn't ask but should have? Anything you usually say but I didn't tee you up? See what I did there? Tee you up.
Yeah.
To answer it.
Man, I don't know. We've talked about a lot of different stuff. Gosh, I think advice to young PTs, if you want to throw it out there, you got to go get it. Nobody's gonna knock on your door. I think maybe naively or arrogantly, I thought like, I'm just going to show up and athletes are going to be banging on my door to come see me, but nobody cares. Like in the real world, you got to go out there and get it, So that's what I tell, young PTs, and or even if you're looking at an older PT looking to make a change, like you can't just expect someone to pick up the phone and call you, hey, you want to come work for the LA Rams or you want to come work for the tour? You got to reach out, you got to network, you got to do your Con Ed stuff, and that's a great way to meet PTs and other decision makers, is doing a local Con Ed course or whatever, and going out there and get it. And then the kind of the balance between being ambitious but also being patient. I think you got to have a little bit of both. If you're too ambitious, you can kind of rub people the wrong way. If you're too patient, then maybe you're not motivated enough to go out there and get it. So finding that balance there is a big deal.
Yeah, love it. All right, 9th hole is something we do on every episode. We call it the parting shot. What's the last thing, the idea, concept, quote, whatever? What do you want to leave with the audience? Here's your flop shot and your gimme. What's your parting shot?
Yeah, I would say maybe shout out to our staff. We have a really good
who else is
right
it?
now.
You said there's 6 of you. I wonder who the people are.
Yeah, so we have more than 6. There's just 6 at every event, and we obviously don't work every event. So We have a good group of PTs right now. So Corey Hugg has been out there the second longest after me. So Corey's been out for, I think, gosh, probably 13 years now or 14 years. Digby Watt, PT, South African PT, lives in North Carolina. So shout out to Digby. He and I started at the same time, and he kind of left and came back. And we have some newer guys, Chris O'Neill, Jason Waddles, Johnny Eichner, Kyle Yamashiro, Frank Wang. Those are all the guys on our staff. And I should have mentioned, so our staff covers the Korn Ferry Tour, the PGA Tour, and the Champions Tour. So
wow, it's a lot of events.
I think there's last I counted, I think we had 44, I think, on the PGA Tour. And then with the Champions Tour and Korn Ferry Tour together, it's almost 100 events, pretty close to it. So pretty much every week from January 1 to this week is our last tournament. There's at least probably 2 tournaments going on. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there might be 4 because we have maybe an opposite field event. So, one group of guys is in Orlando, the other group is in Puerto Rico. Champions Tour is going, Korn Ferry Tour is going. So, I mean, it's sort of all hands on deck at that point, but shout out to our staff. Great group of guys. Those are just the PTs I named. We have trainers and chiros as well. So yeah, definitely love working with our guys, and it's been a long time, but they keep me coming back.
Love it. Jason, appreciate the insight. Thanks for playing 9 holes with us. If this was useful, drop it in the comments. Maybe we'll look into some other pros, and we'll looking forward to having Jason back on the show when you hit the tour. Take some time off, work on your own game, get some downtime, get relaxed. We'll talk to you again soon, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Thanks.